I think people are fascinating. I love that there is a story behind the story. The journey is amazingly beautiful. Join me on this wild and crazy ride.
Brett Stone grew up in a small town in Nebraska. He was the youngest of 4 and the only boy in the family. As a young boy, he lost his father to cancer, so this meant his mom, sisters, and extended family would play an even bigger role in his life. He loved growing up on the farm, and small town life meant that he did not meet a stranger on the street. Brett would go on to graduate at the University of Nebraska, and at the age of 25, he would come out as a gay man. Today, he shares his journey of joy, sadness, anger, loneliness, forgiveness, and ultimately learning to love himself.
So first of all, we have to start this with, you and I work together. So over the last week, we've talked a lot about this interview. I am so grateful that you're here. I know what this means. I know it means a level of vulnerability that not a lot of people are willing to put out into the world. But I do think that this makes a difference in someone's life, so I'm so grateful. So, you ready?
Let's do it.
All right. Tell me about your life growing up. Describe it to me.
Sure. So I grew up on a farm in the middle of nowhere, Nebraska, right on the Kansas border. We had cattle, we had horses, I had sheep, chickens, all kinds of crazy animals. I grew up playing sports. Until I could drive, I probably spent most of my time with my animals, and then as soon as I could drive, I got to go to town a little bit more, spend time with friends. Grew up in a wonderful place. I went to the only school in the county and graduated with 25 other people.
So I didn't know that your school was so small.
Yeah. Yeah, very tiny. And I think our class size was pretty average. We did have a couple of exchange students that graduated with us, but I think, so, I don't know, maybe a few more than that. But 25 was like our core group.
Wow.
And then, let's see. That's kind of the summary. And then I went to the University of Nebraska and graduated with a degree in psychology and a minor in education. Had no idea what I wanted to do. And I ended up working at a gym for about a year. And then my sister, who's also a recruiter, kind of connected me with recruiting. I interviewed with Tech Systems, and they gave me the opportunity to move to Omaha, Kansas City, or Minneapolis. And I chose Minneapolis because I didn't know anybody there, and I wanted to know what that felt like, and to kind of put myself out there. And
go into the big city.
Yeah.
So what did you love most about, when you think about your childhood and you look back, and obviously different than others, what did you love most about it?
I loved, I really found an appreciation for the outdoors. I love being outside, and I was outside as much as I could be. My love for animals, I loved being around all of that all the time. And I think I was really fortunate to grow up with really kind-hearted people who truly care about themselves, and or care about each other, and I just feel really fortunate for that.
That's awesome. If I were to ask your family and friends, because clearly a small town like that, people knew you very well. They knew you differently than people do in other cities and big towns. Mm-hmm. What would they tell me about you? How would they describe Brett Stone, the kid, through high school?
My friends' parents probably would have told me I was a little wild, or would say that I was a little wild, a little bit of ornery, and probably not a great influence on some of my friends. But I think, most of the people that know me, I think, would describe me as kind, caring. Those would be the two adjectives that come to mind, probably, as far as how most people would describe me.
So you are here today to talk about coming out as a gay man. So do you remember the first time, you and I actually had this conversation a bit, because I don't remember the first time that I heard the word gay or homosexual. And when you heard that, what did you believe it to mean?
I don't know that I specifically remember hearing any of those terms for the first time, but I do remember the first time that I kind of got the gist of it. And we were in, I want to say second grade, but I could be wrong on that. And every week or every month, we would get these kind of science bulletins that we would read, and I loved them. I would be super excited when they came. And so this would have been, let's see, kind of mid-90s probably. And I remember seeing...
And you were how old?
I would say second grade.
Second grade, okay.
Somewhere in there. And I remember seeing a headline about AIDS and reading a little bit more into that. And from that moment on, I believed that being gay was synonymous with having AIDS. And if you were gay, that meant you were going to get AIDS, you were going to die. And so that's the first time that I remember learning anything about being gay or what homosexual meant.
Do you remember growing up and never having a girl crush?
Never had a crush on a girl. Never, ever. I remember trying to convince myself that I needed to and trying to pretend like I did, but it was never a real feeling that I ever had. I remember having crushes on like my sister's friends that were in high school or in college or in their weddings or whatever, guy friends, but never ever a girl, no.
Was there ever part of you, so clearly at some age you realize, oh, I'm supposed to like girls, and you went as far as to, in your mind, rehearse a conversation of how it might feel or how somebody may respond to liking a girl. Was there any part of you that just wondered, maybe I'm a late bloomer? Maybe that comes later in life. Maybe someday I'll find a girl attractive in a different way.
One thing that I think is important to talk about today and to share is I've been gay literally as long as I can remember, and I don't remember anything differently ever, right? And I think in your heart you know, but you choose not to accept it or embrace it. You think you can ignore it and bury it for a long time, right? And so, you know, and I remember picturing my life and thinking I was going to marry a woman regardless and was going to have kids and have the life I always imagined having, right? But in my heart I knew that that wasn't right for me. But that's all you see, right? You don't get to see other people living their life as gay people. And that's starting to change, right? But when I was a child, I didn't have that opportunity, so I had no idea what that looked like, right? So I never, I don't know that I ever thought about that specifically, but I did kind of plan out what I wanted my life to look like. And I think that now, being 32, and I'm to that point where it's time to, or I should be doing all these things that I want to be doing, and that are a challenge, it makes it a little bit more, that's a struggle for me, just not being able to see those things come to fruition as easily as they could.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So let's talk about your first guy crush, or let's talk about the first time you remember having that crush and saying, no, I don't just like him as my buddy. I have feelings that would lead me to believe I may be gay or homosexual.
Yeah, I remember it very clearly. I think when you're in elementary, everything's so innocent, right? And you have crushes on people for whatever reason. And then you get into junior high and you start to feel like you want to start dating and do all of that. And I remember feeling that way about a few guys throughout junior high and high school. And it was really hard to get through, right? Because you see everybody else doing the things that you wish you could be doing and experiencing a different version of life that you don't have the opportunity to experience. And that is really hard to go through. But yeah, I do remember very clearly that first feeling when I was in junior high.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I never thought about that. Because not only do you not get to experience it, you don't get to talk about it. Wow. So talk me through your process. Talk me through the process of realizing that you're gay and actually coming to terms with it, right? Because you just shared with me that even when you were planning out your life, it still had a wife and kids in it, even though you knew that wasn't really what it felt like it should mean for you, but it is what you were being told it should look like. So that process from realizing, I'm never going to have feelings for a woman, which means I don't get to have a wife. Or I guess you could choose to have a wife, but I'm going to choose not to have a wife through the process of actual acceptance of I am a gay man and it's time to start choosing to live my life differently.
Yeah. I just can speak from my own experience, right? But I would imagine that most gay people probably go through a period where they contemplate, can I do it or can I not, right? And I just think living a life that's inauthentic, and I just don't understand how that could be fulfilling, right? And I know that there are people who do it, and I couldn't imagine marrying a woman, committing my life to her, and I'm sure that I would love her, right? And maybe not in the way that she wanted to be loved, which is also not fair. And I think I got to the point where I knew I wasn't attracted to women, but it's also not fair to that woman, right? That's how I would, that's kind of what my thought process went through, because I'm not going to love her the way that she deserves to be loved. I'm not giving her the life that she deserves, right? And even with your kids, I mean, you're lying to them, right? You're lying to your wife. You're lying to everybody. You're going to turn out to be a resentful, angry person, and that's no way to live your life. And I think that that's an option, and I'm sure that some people can get through it in their own ways or based off of their faith or whatever. That was not in the cards for me, and I just didn't think that it was fair to do to anybody else.
So then what were the steps that you had to take to, it's one thing to get there in your head and to think it, but to say it, right? Like to say it, because then it becomes more real.
Yeah.
I want to go back to, you talk about resentment, and you and I are close enough that you've shared with me there was a time where you were angry, maybe didn't even realize or acknowledge that it had to do with being gay or homosexual. So talk to me about that time in your life when you felt angry or you were more quick to anger.
Yeah. I think, throughout junior high and high school, I was so busy that I didn't really have time to think about it all that much, right? And so I kind of muscled my way through and chose not to think about it or chose not to give it a lot of thought. And then when I got to college, you're kind of turned loose, right? And I just remember, and I don't know if people saw this or if it was something that was visible, but I was so mad. And you think about, what I talked about, watching everybody experience everything that you should get to experience in adolescence and in high school. And then I'm seeing it in college, right? People are meeting their future spouses. People have really concrete plans. They know exactly who they are and what they want and are going after it. And here I am, I can't even figure out at a foundational level who I am and what I want, right? So it's very confusing. And I think that filled me up with a lot of anger. And because I just wanted to have the same life and the same experiences as everybody else around me. And part of moving to Minneapolis was the thought that I could probably finally start to get comfortable with myself and be okay and be free of judgment of the people that know me really well. Because in Nebraska, and we've joked about this before, Nebraska kind of has 2 degrees of separation. You can't get away with anything without people talking about it, even in Lincoln. And so, I moved to Minneapolis. I worked there for about a year, and I think what it was, Brenda, is just, all the steam and just, imagine going through all of those, when you're a teenager, you're in high school, even in college, and your hormones are just up and down, up and down, up and down, and going crazy. You can't talk about it. You can't express it. You're holding all of that in. And I think I got to a point where I literally felt like I was going to explode. And that tipping point for me was at about 25. And that's when I decided to start to come out.
So who was the first person you ever talked to about being gay?
I don't know that I remember this. I remember trying to tell my best friend Chrissy several times, and I remember trying to tell my mom several times, but I would always deflect. I would get really upset, and I would cry. And there's a couple of songs that would especially tip me off. But
maybe some alcohol.
Yeah, maybe a little bit of alcohol. I don't know. And I would just cry, and I would say that I just wish my dad was here, and would make up all these. I would always deflect to that, right? And so I remember telling both Chrissy and my mom, trying to tell them several times, but never being brave enough to do it. And when I was in Minneapolis, I'd been there for a couple weeks. A coworker of mine decided to invite me out for New Year's Eve. So she was having a party and casually mentioned that one of her gay friends was going to be there. And of course, I get super excited. And
it's my moment. It's going to be my year.
So I get there, and I can't tell which one it is, right? There's a very tall, very handsome guy there. And I was like,
I think that's my type for sure.
So come to find out, it was him. And we go to New Year's Eve, we party, we come back. We end up coming back to his apartment afterwards. And long story short, he gave me a kiss on the cheek. And I remember I was like, like got all panicky and weird and goofy. And anyway, I remember waking up the next day and I was like, yep, like, this is it. Like, this feels right, confirmed. Like, I needed confirmation. I didn't.
And you were 25?
I would have been, yeah, I think so. 24 or 25.
Okay.
And, well, I would have been 24 because I came out when I was 25. And so my birthday's in March. And then I remember the next day I called my mom, and I was just kind of talking to her. I was like, I finally went out, met some people, was excited. And I go, and a guy kissed me. And she goes, you're on speaker and your sister's here. And I was like, okay, we'll talk later. And just kind of kept going. But my mom didn't even, I don't know that she batted an eye at it. And anyway, so I after that, I started telling friends what happened, and I don't exactly remember how I approached it. But that's when it started. That's what really got the ball rolling as far as telling people.
Because that felt safer, saying, another person kissed me on the cheek felt safer than saying, this is who I think I am?
No, I don't know that that's it. I think it just felt like it was time. And just having an experience with someone that I thought was attractive. It was like, yep, this is it. This is right. This feels right. It's time.
So what did that finally feel like? Like after you say that out loud and your mom says, oh, your sister's in the room, and then you start talking to people, what is that emotion? And I'm sure there's several. Yep.
It was scary. But at the same time, I didn't really think that it was going to be that big of a surprise for anybody, especially my family. Because I like I told you, I'd never been attracted to a woman. I'd never dated at all the way through. So I thought it would be pretty obvious, but it wasn't. I mean, all of my friends were like, okay. Or finally, or whatever, however they responded, or I always knew, like, good for you, I'm proud of you.
Did you say, well, if you could have talked to me about it, it would have made my life just a little easier. Thanks a lot, friend.
Oh, yeah, no, no, that's all on me, but,
Let's go back. Let's talk then. So you talk about, you felt like anybody who was close enough to you was likely to say, oh, I kind of figured, or I knew, for whatever reasons. Let's talk about your mom and sisters. Tell me about telling them. So let's start with your mom.
So how I did it, I would not recommend to anybody else. So you fast forward, I talked about New Year's. I just really love holidays.
It's a new year, new you.
We fast forward to Halloween, and I had met a guy playing volleyball, and I thought he was pretty cool. We were hanging out a lot and talking a lot, and I totally misread the situation. And he had invited me out on Halloween to go on a party bus for a bachelor party for one of his friends. And so we dressed up together, right, went out, And something happened that I got the message. I was like, okay, I misread what's happening here. And I got mad. And I remember I was on the party bus, and I just decided to text my entire family, so my mom, my stepdad, my sisters, my brother-in-laws, all of them, and tell them at probably midnight. Used some not very nice language, was not very nice to myself, right? And a very cowardly way to go about it, and I'm not proud of how I did it, and I wish I would have handled it completely different, because I think I would have set myself up much better. But I was scared, and I was really scared, especially I think that conversation with my mom where she said, maybe not now, right? I think I got the hint that probably wasn't the best, or wasn't going to be the easiest thing to bring up, right? And so that's how I did it. The next day, my sisters called me, had really long conversations with them. I was on the phone that whole next Sunday, and I have to give credit to my stepdad, because he was by far the best out of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And he just kept saying, you're the exact same person that you've always been. And I think that your sisters will eventually see that. And so that was awesome to hear. And my mom, my mom was great. She is awesome. She's always been awesome. I hate crying. My mom is fantastic. And I remember she was a little upset that she just said thank you. She just said that she was worried about my health. And which, hey, can't blame her, right? She didn't know. That was the biggest thing that I remember her saying, but, she didn't love me any less, any differently. And she had a little bit of time to think about it, and she's like, this isn't, right. She wasn't as shocked as after a couple of days came.
Mm-hmm.
But my sisters, words were said that were hurtful, and but it's okay, right? I don't think, the way I look at it, Brenda, that, I struggled with something for, let's say, 20 years, right? Because,
Mm-hmm.
when you, let's just say before 5 doesn't count. And how can I expect anybody to just suddenly get it, right? Something that I've fought off for so long, and something that I've ignored and tried not to be, or probably more so just ignored. How can I expect them to just flip a switch for something that they can't understand at all, right? I'm the only one that can understand it truly. And I just, it was really, really hard. There were a couple years following that it was really, really tough. And we moved on from it, right? And I just, right after that was the loneliest. And I think, I don't know if it was the saddest I've ever felt, but it was by far the loneliest. I was in a city where I didn't really know anybody. My best friend was in Liberal, Kansas, so like 20 hours away. We were both broke, so we couldn't go see each other. And, but we talked a lot. And one thing that I will never, ever forget, holy moly. We decided to go skiing as a family in November.
So
October.
So Halloween, okay.
For Thanksgiving, and
your family.
with my family.
Okay.
So not even a month after, and Chrissy, my best friend,
This is the good stuff, right?
Yep. she, again, like I said, neither of us were making any money, and Mom flew me into Denver, and Christy drove up from Liberal to come skiing for support. Her car broke down, and she had to pay I don't know what to fix it. And she got a rental car and still came and drove 8 hours. Was there with me, and it was me and her the whole Thanksgiving weekend. Pretty much just us, and everybody else kind of did their thing.
So clearly, a very powerful story. Mm-hmm. Thank you for your willingness to be so vulnerable and share it. My hope with doing these videos and these interviews is that somebody who needs to hear your story hears your story. And I think and I hope that that will include moms and aunts and uncles and sisters and friends that don't know what to say. Mm-hmm. Maybe a mom or a grandma doesn't know what to say, or a dad doesn't know what to say because they don't understand it, right? Like that didn't get to be part of their generation. Maybe a sister, let's face it, the ones who love us the most get scared for us, right? Mm-hmm. So what did you want to hear in that moment? What would have been the best case scenario?
Just I love you, which they did say. I remember Holly saying, I was still her brother and she still loved me. And I remember that above all else. And that was good to hear. But I think it's as simple as that. I don't know that you need to say anything. I don't know that you need to react in a big way. Just a hug. I'm proud of you and I love you. And nothing's going to change. Is probably all you need to say. Because I think at the end of the day, all anybody's asked for, or is asking for, is just to be treated the exact same way as they were before. And to just be fully accepted and loved for who that person is. And to be treated the same as everybody else.
But we've always been super open. But one of the things in this conversation, when you talked about being lonely, mm-hmm. and I think this is a lesson for all of us in whatever situation, whether that's a friend who has, we found out they have cancer, or they're going through a divorce, or they've lost a child, whatever it is, as humans, when we don't know what to say, we say nothing. Mm-hmm. Or when we don't know how to act, we stay away. And in a way, I think we justify in our minds that we're protecting the other person, but did you want to call the next day and to talk about it more? How do you think you could have been less lonely?
I leaned on my friends that weren't in Minneapolis mm-hmm. pretty heavily. I think that going through that experience allowed me to get closer with the people that I worked with, because I worked with a phenomenal group of people in Minneapolis, and I'm so grateful for having them there. And I remember, so the Sunday after all those conversations were had, I went into my boss's office, closed the door, and cried so hard I couldn't breathe. And he just listened, gave me a hug, told me he loved me, basically said what I told you would be the good things to hear, and just was supportive. And I think I shared with you, I got a note from the director of that office, basically saying, we love you, we're here for whatever you need. And she put a quote in there that said, my husband always says I'd rather be hated for who I am than loved for who I'm not, right? And that's kind of his motto. And that was really nice to hear too, and I agree with that. But all of my closest friends, we were all moving in different directions and living in different cities, and so I didn't have a lot of FaceTime with them, right? But was definitely talking to them. And I'm also the kind of person that goes more internal when they're upset and wants to be alone. So.
Whose opinion matters most to you?
If you would have asked me this a couple years ago, I probably would have told you anybody I care about. But I've been doing a lot of work on myself in the last couple years. And the thing I'm realizing is I think at the end of the day, the only opinion that matters as far as your self-image is probably your own. Not so easy to execute against, right? But I like the idea of it. But kind of coming back to how I opened up my response to this question is, I have a very fine line. I either care a whole lot about you or I don't care at all. And if you're on this side, I do care a lot about what you think of me and how you perceive me and everything that I do. So to say whose opinion matters most, I don't know that I have a good, because I do care. I care a whole lot about what people think and how they view me, and I just want to be viewed as a good person at the end of the day. And so there's probably a pretty long list of whose people I would say opinion matters most.
So how long have you lived openly gay? That means you have to divulge your age. People will be like,
it's been about 8 years. Most of that has been in Denver. And so yeah, I came out in 25. I moved to Denver, I think, when I was 26. And have been here. And it's interesting because, coming back, we kind of, I think we wanted to talk about stereotypes a little bit, right? And dating and all of that. And I think it's so interesting because a big reason why I didn't want to come out was because of what I saw on TV, what I saw in media, and the images that I saw, I didn't relate to, right? And I was like, okay, if that's what being gay means, then I'm not that. And it was confusing. And then after, in Minneapolis and after New Year's and everything starting to feel more comfortable and to explore what it actually is, you learn there is a broad spectrum of people that you meet and that are gay. And there's, people, they come from all walks of life, right? I mean, there's people that come from cities, that come from farms like me, or come from small towns, and all over the world. And everybody's different. There's no one shoe fits all. Like, that's the farthest thing from the truth, right? And a lot of them, you wouldn't know they were gay unless they tell you, right? And I think everyone wants, I shouldn't speak for everybody, right? But again, I think it comes back to, they all just want to be treated equally and the same as everyone else.
So what are some of the difficult realities of being openly gay and living as a gay man?
I think that we cultivate the life that we want, and at the end of the day, you are responsible for building that and taking ownership of the life that you want, and if you want something, you better go after it. And so that would be my message to anybody that's watching this that's struggling or is making excuses or whatever, right? I think that there's a lot of opportunity out there, and if you truly want something, you'll go out and make it happen. And I think that I felt sorry for myself for a little while, and that's not the way to create an awesome life, right? So just, we all need to cultivate our own reality.
Is there still times where, obviously, I think you said 8 years. Is there still times when it's hard to say or to let somebody know you are gay?
Yeah. I think you can get a read on somebody pretty well of how they might take it. I've gotten better with this over the years because again, there's a line, right? And if you're on this side, I care what you think. If you're on this side, I don't care at all. And a lot of those people that I might read or might assume that they would have a negative reaction, I might just avoid it or not bring it up because I don't want it to be there, or I don't care, right?
Yeah.
And I just own it. It just depends on the situation.
So I think you touched on this a little bit earlier, but if you're comfortable with it, are there parts of the gay community, you know, you'd mentioned that when you'd first come to Denver and there were parts of, and please correct me if I state this incorrect, that maybe you didn't identify with, or maybe you didn't understand, or maybe it didn't, that you weren't comfortable with, and so you thought, well, wait a minute, I'm not that. Is there other parts of the gay community that you are uncomfortable with, or that you maybe don't necessarily feel like you identify with?
Yeah, and I don't want to come off as judgmental, right? Or I think, like I said, I think that you can live your life however you want to live it, right? And for me, I hate how, and you know, I'm not as involved with the gay community, and I struggle with that, with what that means, as I probably should be, right? I mean, I don't know that I use my voice to create change, or I am today, but this is probably the biggest step that I've taken towards that. But I hate how we are portrayed on TV shows or in movies, and what you see in the media. Because I think that it feeds a lot of the stereotypes, right? That everybody's over the top. You know, people will make jabs at me about loving fashion, and I'm like, no. And you know, they'll put us in a bucket, and I don't like that. And I think a lot of where that comes from is what people are seeing on TV and out there. But you know, and I hate that everything's so sexualized, and because that's not how I'm choosing to live, and I just, again, I think it comes down to we're always put in the bucket of the loudest voices, right? And there's a lot of other voices that are not as loud and are looking to be represented in a different light, or so I hope. Maybe I feel that it's that way, but so I think it's just like the rest of the population, right? There's people that swing very far to the left, there's people that swing very far to the right, and there's people in the middle, and I would say I'm in the middle, and you know, I'm sure that lots of other people are in that space as well, and but everybody thinks of the far left.
Yep, I think that's fair. So when do you feel most comfortable in your skin? Like, we all have that moment where it's like, man, this is where, these are my people. So when do you feel most comfortable in your skin?
After 2 old fashions. No, I'm kidding.
It's amazing.
No, I think, you know, when you're surrounded by your tribe of people that love you and you have fun with no matter what, you feel comfortable, that's a big thing for me. And I think it's becoming easier as time goes, and it's definitely gotten leaps and bounds better with age of just being you and owning it, right? But I think being with the people that you know, love, and support you unconditionally, it's easiest to be your true self around them. But life's a lot easier when you can be genuine 24/7, right? And live one consistent life instead of putting on a work hat, partner hat, friend hat. You just get to be the same person all the way through. It's much less exhausting.
Agreed. So you talk about the people who love you the most. And you talked about telling your mom and your sisters, and I always go back, and your stepdad, I always go back to, it's sometimes scariest to tell the ones who love you the most because they worry most about us. So I know you shared with them your story and told them that you were a gay man. Then you went through a very lonely period. But I also know you now, and I know how excited you get about going home and spending time with family. How have you worked through maybe that initial not knowing what to say, maybe some of the hard conversations, to now just I guess, forgiveness or love and acceptance? Or how have you made that huge transition from the first reaction being a bit shocking to now looking forward to the days going home?
I think I could break it down into 2 steps. One, I think it took a long time for me to find forgiveness. And I was mad for a really long time. I didn't want to be around them. I didn't want to talk to them. And eventually I made the determination that all I can control is how I react and how I show up and how I present myself. That's all I can control. Made a world of difference. The second piece is I'm going to keep trudging along, and you can get on this bus or you can get off, right? And I think that's kind of how I felt when I brought my ex home. And I think it's so important that just exposure, right? As much as I don't love social media, I think that we have so much to be grateful for with social media, because it's allowed people to see that we're just normal people, living our lives like I talked about, same type of life that everybody else is living. And so just by exposing them to that and seeing, breaking down or eliminating the stereotypes or the beliefs that they might have thought or they might have thought I was going to turn into something. And so them seeing not only myself, but that I brought 2 guys home over the last couple of years, and how great they were too, right? And just getting that exposure and kind of eliminating a lot of those stereotypes or preconceived beliefs that they might have had also makes a big difference. And I just think, well, what I was saying with social media is it's so important that we educate people, right? And try to talk and just get it out there instead of creating stories in our head and confirming pre-existing beliefs, right?
So when people see, when they see you, when they meet you, what do you want them to see? Besides a devastatingly handsome man.
You're taking the words out of my mouth. I think, it comes down to morals, right? I think I want them to see somebody that's successful, that is driven, and this is in no particular order, that is genuinely caring and loving. Just a good person, right? I mean, that's really all I care about. If you're on the other side, if you're on the left side of my line, I don't care what you think. I'm kidding. No, just a genuine, kind, caring, loving person who's supportive.
What has been the lesson that has taken you the longest to learn?
How to love yourself. It's something I'm still struggling with. And even coming out here today and being so concerned with what people are going to think and how they might react, right, is such a scary thought. And I've just reminded myself all week that it doesn't matter, right? If we're impacting 1 or 2 people, then that's going to make me happy enough. And but learning to love yourself, I think, is one of the hardest lessons for anybody. Yep. But for me, it's been a journey. I think I really hated who I was for a really long time, and so it's been even harder to reverse that. And it's taking a lot of work and a lot of effort, and there are still plenty of parts that I hate about myself, right? And I'm just trying to learn to love and accept myself for who I am. And, we talked about it earlier, but how can I expect anybody else to do that when I don't give myself the same respect?
Yeah. So what do you believe is, and this is a deep question, right? And I think, honestly, Brett, I feel so genuinely lucky. I probably spend more time with you than I do my own children, right? Because we're in the office every single day together. I know you as an incredibly hardworking man, so incredibly smart. You love your family. You love your dog. We should definitely make sure Abby gets gets talked about in this. That you have a strong relationship with your fiance. That like you and I can talk all day long, because even though we may live different lives, and I'm a woman and you're a man, we have just so much in common that we can talk about anything and everything. When you think about your life and living as a gay man. What do you believe is the root to homophobia and prejudice? And then how do we start the conversation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a couple things. I think one is fear of the unknown and fear of things that are different and things that we don't understand. I think two is there's some misinformation out there that's really outdated and incorrect. And then three is, and again, I know this is probably not going to be popular, but religion. I think that we are taught going to church to be respectful, to be loving, to be caring, and to care for our neighbors, right? And just to love, right? That's the main message and the main takeaway. But seeing the message that churches are portraying, not everybody, right? Some, and what they tell and share about gay people is completely off the mark, right? I think that I myself am on a mission to prove I'm just like everybody else. And I think we can start the conversation by having the conversation and getting it out there and not being afraid to talk about the hard stuff and just tackling it and being facing it.
Are you yourself, would you consider yourself a spiritual person?
Yeah, definitely. I think I've gone on a little bit of a journey in the last couple of years, and I certainly am spiritual. Same things we talked about with identifying with the gay community. Lately, I've been having a really hard time with the church. Because I don't believe that a lot of people live up to the principles that they claim to. And I think that there's a lot of hypocrisy when you look at how lives are being lived, but yet they choose to judge people who are different.
I agree with you, though. I think having the conversation, talking about the hard stuff, and not just throwing the zingers out there and letting it be, right? But being willing to have the conversation on both sides of it is going to be what actually continues to evolve the change.
And be open, right? Just remove judgment from your train of thought and be curious. Just like anything else that you're looking to learn about or to better understand, the only way you're going to do that is by asking open-ended questions and being open to the responses.
Yep. So this is last question. When people watch your story, what do you want them to take away from your story?
I think there's two groups that I really want to hit today. I think that it's, well, maybe three. I'm hoping that people who will watch this will be anybody of any age who's struggling with themselves. I'm hoping that there's people who are open-minded and just curious and want to see what it's all about. And I think that there's the other side of people whose minds need to be changed a little bit. And I think my message to those people that are struggling with themselves are just be you, own it, love yourself, and keep moving forward. To the other side of it, I just want people to see that I'm fairly normal. I have emotions like everybody else. And that I want the same thing as everybody else, right? And I just want to be treated the same as everybody else. And I try to present myself in the world and be the best that I can be on all fronts. And hopefully other people can see that.
Well, I can see it. I just got emotional. I think you're awesome. So thank you.
Thanks for having me. You're awesome.